So I do want to give you a heads up that today is a pretty big day. In our collection of talks on anxiety and the mental health side of things, today is an enormous day. And so I don't have a big funny illustration to jump in and make you laugh, and then we're just going to really jump right into it. We don't have a ton of time. Honestly, I went like a little bit over in the 9 o'clock, and so I'm going to try my best to corral that just a little bit. So I'm going to end the intro in just like 15 seconds and just say, but what I need you to do is prepare yourself, because just mentally, this is a big day today. For those of you who have friends or family members, or you yourself struggle with anxiety, today is an enormous day in terms of what we need to discuss and walk through and talk through from a biblical perspective. So we're going to jump right in immediately. I'm going to give you the definition to a word. I'm not going to give you the word. However, I would like for you to process, hey, what could the word be? So I'm going to give you the definition, and at the end of the day, it's because this word is so common to us that a lot of times we can just glance over it. We read the word, it's like, oh, okay, I understand what this word is. I get this. Okay, cool. And then we just actually miss the real intense meaning that comes with it. And so I only want to give you the definition. I will not give you the word until a little bit later. But I just want you to say, hey, do I know the word? For sure, everyone knows the word. But I'm going to give you the definition. I'm going to tell you the word. Here's the definition: to inspire with hope, courage, or confidence. That's the definition of the word. To inspire with hope, courage, or confidence. Over the last 3 weeks, we've talked in depth about anxiety. We started with week 1, where we talked about shame-based anxiety, where the anxiety that you feel is based upon this idea of shame. And we talked about there's an enormous difference between guilt and shame. Guilt says, hey, you know what? I've done something wrong. I messed up, and it's caused harm on some other people, or possibly harm to me, possibly harm to both of us. And I'm guilty, right? So guilt is a big thing. Shame, however, is not guilt. Shame is not have I done something wrong, I am the something wrong. Now, a lot of times guilt can lead us into shame. We can get to a place where we feel guilty and we can't resolve that guilt, whether it's we just can't bring ourselves to own up to it, or to fess up to it, or to face the consequences, and so we run or we hide or we conceal it or whatever that is. And then that can give birth to, it can breed some shame inside of us. But guilt and shame in and of themselves are very different things. Guilt is actually a good thing. Guilt lets us know, you know what, we didn't do it right? We didn't do it right. Guilt is not a bad thing. For us to feel guilty about mistakes we've made, that's a good thing for us. It's a great gift that God has given us. However, what is not good is for that guilt to turn into shame, where we begin to realize that it wasn't just the actions we did that were wrong. We begin to think, you know what, but the reason I did that action was because I'm wrong, right? There's something wrong is me. I can't do anything right because I'm just wrong. And so we don't want to do that. What we want to do is introduce you to the let's move forward Jesus. That at the end of the day, that Jesus says, hey, shame is not a part of your life. And guilt is a part of your life, and that's a part of the story of humanity, but shame is not supposed to be there. So Jesus steps in and says, hey, here's the deal. If you're hanging out with anxiety that's based upon this idea of shame, he says you can get rid of it. Even if other people in your world don't want you to get rid of it, even if they won't let go of what you need to let go of, he says there are two different ropes. Let it go. And you will find that they are holding their very own rope based upon your shame and your guilt. But it is what it is. Sometimes you can't cause someone else to let go what's in their hands. And because they're holding on to it doesn't mean you've got to hold on to your own rope. Just let it go. In other words, we said at some point we've got to figure out that we value what Jesus says more than what other people think. That if there's guilt in our life, we got to own up to it, and we got to say, hey, you know what, if there's a punishment, I'm grown enough to take it. And if I need to make something right, I'm going to make it right. But I tell you what, I'm not going to miss out on life because I'm ashamed of the wrong things that I've done. I did them, and now I got to move on. And so that's what Jesus is saying. Hey, let's introduce ourselves to the let's move forward Jesus. Week 2, we talked about anxiety. And specifically, we were looking for the opposite of anxiety. And we asked Google, I asked a million different ways on Google, I asked the 9 and the 11, hey, what is the opposite of a bunch of words? And then I said, hey, what's the opposite of anxiety? 95% of the people in here and 100% of the 9 and almost everyone online said the opposite of anxiety is peace. And last week, we looked at some biblical thoughts that says that's probably not true. That honestly, the opposite of anxiety is trust. That the reason we worry, the reason we have this anxiety that's unhealthy in us, is because we don't trust that everything's going to turn out okay. That we don't trust that Jesus can control some of these things that we have no control over. That we don't trust fill in the blank. And if we had trust, trust actually breeds peace. That peace comes from trust. And that we've got to stop asking God, God, give me peace. I want peace. Because we are in a culture and a mentality that just wants to skip to the good part, right? We want to Instagram or TikTok the bad boy. You know what I'm talking about? You see the plane taking off and it says skip to the good part. And the next thing you're at the beach, right? No, we can't skip to the good part. We've got to go through the journey. We've got to go through the process. And trust is a process. And the byproduct of trust is peace. Week 3. Here's our question for the morning. Life is going to happen. The question is, who will you be with when it does? Life is going to happen. The question is, who will you be with when it does? Now, there's an interesting biblical thought that I want to read to you this morning, and I want you to think through this thought, specifically applying it towards anxiety. There's a guy named Paul. He's a church planter, and Paul, the church planter, he plants a number of churches, and one of the churches in a city called Corinth, and he writes a couple of letters to the city, and we actually have 2 of those letters that make it into what we know as the Bible today. And in 1 Corinthians, his first letter to that church that he helped get started, in chapter 10, verse 13, he says this, "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it." I want to read that to you again and again. Through the lens of anxiety, I just want you to hear it. "No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. And God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it." So the question becomes, all right, are we saying that anxiety is a temptation, right? Is it a temptation? If it's a temptation, is it a sin? Is it now a sin to be anxious? Is it a sin to worry? I don't know if it's a clear-cut answer in all of the above. However, I will say this. It is for sure a temptation not to trust Jesus. It's also a temptation to be preoccupied with things we have no control over, so much so that we miss the really important things in our life that are happening right in front of us. It's also a temptation to be paralyzed by fear and miss out on what God has for us, because we just simply can't move forward. Those temptations are very real. But what's interesting, he says, he will actually provide a way out so that we can endure it. He'll provide a way out so that we can endure it. Now, I don't like the word endure. I don't know if y'all are endure fans. I'm not an endure fan, okay? I'm an endorphin fan. I'm not an endure fan. You know what endurance is? Endurance is like, it's just a lot of throw up is what endurance is. You know what I'm saying? It's just a lot of throw up. You know what I'm talking about? You run, if you want to run for some endurance, right? The experts say you got to sprint. Small sprints builds endurance, right? And so you do like the first sprint, like 20 yards, right? I'm just going to sprint 20 yards. Like, hey, I got that. Let's go. I'm about to build some endurance. On the 20th 20-yard sprint, though, that's what's happening. Except that there's nothing coming out after the 21st or 20th. It's just lots of just air, just really good smelling air just coming out. That's what's happening, right? Endurance is awful. You know how you build endurance? Is you take yourself to the limit, and right before you give up, you say to yourself 4 more steps, right? Come on, just to the next post, to the next street light. Right, I'm done. And when you're running, you know what I'm talking about? Those of you who run before, you know what I'm talking about? Your legs start feeling like, I can't even feel my legs no more. And you have to look down, but you don't look down because you might tumble forward. Like, I don't have legs. I can't even feel my legs. That's what's happening. And in that moment, you make a decision. You know what? 10 more seconds. 10 more seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right? And you've done it. And then the next time, all of a sudden, you've extended your limit. Right? So when I see temptation and enduring it, it's like, no. Jesus, I avoid all the things that make me throw up on. I just avoid those things. So I'm not interested in enduring temptation. If you want to E-word it, I want to eliminate it, right? Let me just be done with it. What's also really interesting, it says, he will provide us a way out so that we can endure it. In other words, he's saying the endurance pain you go through is so much better than actually giving in to the temptation. He's like, so that you can. Oh, no. So that I can endure it? No. I don't want to endure it. He's like, no, I'm going to give you a way so you can. I'm going to give you a way out so that you can do this. Like, why are you smiling, Jesus? Stop smiling when you say that. But what's also interesting is he says a way out. What is the way out? What is offered so that we can endure, so that we can see through it, get past it, survive it? There's another really interesting thought about, he uses the word that he won't allow you to be tempted beyond what you can bear, right? Like shoulder or carry. There's another moment when he's using the similar language, a different letter to a different church, but he's talking about things that we carry and bear. And he says this in his letter to Galatians, same church planter, Paul. He says this in 6:2. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Carry word, bear one another's burdens, depending on what translation you read. So he says, hey, I'm not going to give you a temptation any greater than what you can bear. And then he says, hey, what I want you to do is I want you to bear, I want you to carry one another's burdens. Now remember, our question this morning was life is going to happen. The question is, who will you be with when it does? Life is going to happen. The question is, who will you be with when it does? So now my question is, all right, so if followers of Jesus are supposed to bear or carry one another's burdens, is anxiety a burden? Does it qualify? Feels fairly burdensome to me, you know? So now we're in another place. It's like, okay, hold on. All right, so you're saying if I'm a follower of Jesus, then I need to be willing to carry or help bear the anxiety burden that someone else has that I'm a friend with, right? I'm a friend, a family member with, right? Someone I care about, that I've got to be willing to do that. But see, the thing is, Jesus wasn't aware of how busy life is in 2022. You know, he didn't know about all these things. Jesus didn't have to worry about the gram and the talk and all those things. He didn't have to worry about that. Jesus didn't have to worry about any of those things. Jesus was just putting his sandals on and his dress made for men, and he was walking around just talking about people. Right? That's all he was doing. He wasn't worried about these other things. So he didn't know, obviously, what he was talking about, right? No, of course he did. But that's difficult because we got a plate, and on our plate, all we can eat. And we have filled it up because we're really good at figuring out how to put as much on our plate as possible. And so when we read something like this, there's an expectation of a follower of Jesus to help bear one another's burdens. You're like, I'm looking at my plate, and there's not a lot of space on here. There's not a lot of space. And so now you're telling me I got to take something off my plate to make space for someone else's burden? And it's not even a good burden. It's a burden that happens in their heart, in their head. It's anxiety. Like, can't we just say, suck it up, buttercup, move on? But you want me to put that on my plate? That's a good question. As I mentioned earlier, life's going to happen. The question is, who are you with when it happens? Now, what's really interesting, when we read carry each other's burdens and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ, it's written in a way that doesn't say to be passive. In other words, it doesn't say, hey, clear off a place on your plate. Like, just take a little sliver, take a piece, and then if one of your friends or family members happens to walk by and places some stuff on your plate, then you got to take it, right? It's not written passive at all. It's no, be active in this. In other words, don't actively just clear a place on your plate, then actively go after and say, hey, how can I lighten this load? How can I jump in? How can I be a part of the solution with you? Hey, what's going on? No, not how are you? How are you really, right? Like, tell me, really, how are you? And I'm asking because I've cleared some space on my plate. And if you got something that can hop on my plate, I'll walk with it with you. We'll eat it together. But it's an active participation piece of that. And we're jumping in it together. There's this other phrase. It says this, Hebrews 10, 24, 25. And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. He said, hey, make sure that you are considering, thinking through, being intentional about how we can spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Spur one another on. Like you're on a horse and you got some cowboy kicks on. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to spur that horse in the rear. We're going to kick it in the rear end and move it in the direction we want to go towards love and good deeds. He said, not only do I want you to be an active participant and trying to clear some space on your plate and then inviting another burden to hop onto your plate, I also want you to say, hey, you know what? Every once in a while, you got to get on the back and kick them in the rear end and let's get going in the right direction. People. He's talking about specifically this idea of the gathering of believers. He's talking about like church. In other words, if you look around to your left and to your right and to the front and to the back, like there should be some people in here that honestly, we are responsible for these things. It's not just a Sunday morning, let's get together and let's laugh a little bit and sing a couple good songs and then ready, break, and then get out of here. Like that's not the whole point. But there should be some element of responsibility that exists among a collection of followers of Jesus that says, hey, we're in this together. And so he says, don't give up, because if there's any place that you can find someone to help spur you on and clear some space on their plate, it ought to be in a gathering of followers of Jesus. They gather regularly to say, you know what, Jesus is most important and God's going to be at the forefront of my life. Where else would you rather go to find the help that you're looking for? And honestly, the truth is, we probably got some steps in the right direction that we can take on that as a church. I mean, if you're thinking through right now and you haven't been that person for someone else, for sure, if you're thinking, no one's been that for me, that's the wrong attitude. But if you are thinking, you know what, I haven't actually been that for anybody here. Okay, well, here's your sign. This idea of meeting together in community, it's pretty neat. Did you recognize that the word that I gave you the definition for was in the passage we just read? Did anybody have the word encourage as the word for the definition? Encourage. To inspire with hope, courage, or confidence. Encourage. To inspire with hope, courage, or confidence. Do not give up meeting together, as some of you are in the habit of doing, but inspire with hope, courage, and confidence one another. And all the more as you see the day approaching. Encouragement. I don't know. I feel like when I'm struggling with anxiety, I don't have a lot of hope, courage, or confidence. In fact, when anxiety is big, I'm lacking all three of those things. When anxiety is big, I mean, the confidence is out the door, you know? And for sure, I don't have any courage. I might have a glimmer, a sliver of hope, like, there's got to be a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere, you know? There might be a little bit. But it makes sense. It makes sense that, goodness, there's a responsibility for us to be encouragers, to be the people that inspire folks with hope, courage, and confidence in the midst of their anxiety. Now, let me give you a really good example of what encouragement looks like. There is a guy by the name of Barnabas that we find in the Bible. And we find him in a bunch of different places throughout a bunch of different books. He's mentioned a couple of different times. Actually more than a couple. A lot of many times he's mentioned. Barnabas actually wasn't his name. It was a nickname that was given to him. His real name was Joseph. And Joseph was a great name, solid name. It's just that this guy was so stinking encouraging. They said, you know what, we're going to give you a new nickname. And so they gave it Barnabas. Barnabas means son of encouragement. In other words, it's like if encouragement, like the ideal of encouragement, like the most purest, perfect form of encouragement, if encouragement was to have a child, it would have been Joseph, right? This guy. And so they just said, you're so incredible at encouraging, we're not even going to call you Joseph anymore. We're just going to call you Barnabas. Now, Barnabas, just to put a little pause in us, we got to do a little bit of backtracking. Before talking about a guy who gets another name, there was a guy named Paul, church planner, we've been talking about him. Before he was Paul, his name was Saul. And Saul was a Pharisee, he was a religious leader, and he was absolutely dedicated to killing off the movement of Christianity. He thought it was a sham. He thought it was a fake. He thought it was the single greatest danger to Judaism. And so he made it his life's work. He was like, that's it. I'm going to wipe them off the face of the planet. I'm going to put them all in prison, or I'm going to put them all in the grave. And so he killed a bunch, and he put a bunch in prison. All legal, right? Every single one of them. He had the right and the ability to do and the backing from Rome to make it happen because they were running their own little government scheme through the Jewish temple. And that's what was happening. And so he was going all over the place, arresting folks, putting them in prison. And there was a moment that was counted in the Bible where he stands there and watches and officiates over the death of a follower of Jesus, a stoning, a guy named Stephen. And so Saul is all in on this. And one day Saul comes face to face with the light of Jesus. And he hears the voice of Jesus and he just asks me, he says, hey, why are you persecuting my church? Like, why are you doing this? Fast forward, Paul eventually becomes Paul. Saul is blinded, he can't see, and he's like that for a few days. And eventually a follower of Jesus goes to where Saul is, completely blinded, and he prays that he would be healed. And Jesus gives him a sight and says, hey, here's the deal. I've got a mission for you, and it's to spread the news of the realness of Jesus throughout the entire Roman Empire, right? You're a Roman citizen. You can go anywhere you want. And so spread it all over the place. And so he starts doing it. Gives his life to Jesus. Radically turns things around. Fast forward just a little bit. He wants to go and meet with the guys who hung out with Jesus in the ministry, because Paul didn't do this, right? Paul was later. And so he was just killing Christians. He never hung out with Jesus. And so he wants to go hang out with Peter and all those guys, right? All the big guys, you know what I'm saying? And so he's going to Jerusalem, all the OG disciples, right? That's what he's going to do. He said, let me go and meet these guys. Well, it says this in the book of Acts, chapter 9. It says this, talking about Paul. When he came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. In other words, they're like, no. You are not about to pull the Trojan horse okie doke on us. No. No, we know exactly who you are. We know exactly what you're about. We've got your resume. We've seen the videos. There is no chance that you're coming. We're not telling you where we are. We're not even going to give you the opportunity to meet with us because we know who you are. Enter Barnabas. Barnabas shows up and he says, hey, I've actually investigated this, spent some time. He's legit. I know what you're thinking, but he's legit. He's the real deal. I'll vouch for him. I'll put my name on the line. You can trust him because you trust me. Now, we know how that ended up. Paul gets to hang out with these old school folks, gets a fire lit in him, and he becomes the greatest church planter the world's ever seen. Multiple countries, continents, churches all over the place. Paul decides that he wants to do this by going on missionary journeys. And so he picks out cities and he kind of plots a course. Sometimes he doesn't know exactly how the course is going to go, but he does the best he can. And so Barnabas is like, hey, you're brand new to this thing. Let me jump in. So Barnabas goes with him on his first missionary journey. And it's going to be grueling. I mean, Paul is so like on fire for planting these churches. I mean, he's just going for it. He's like, full send, let's go 1,400 miles of church planting journey, right? Some in a ship, some on foot, some probably were out on a donkey. Who knows what he's doing? But he's for sure not taking a Tesla, right? There's none of those things. 1,400 miles. And with them, Paul and Barnabas are going, and they take with them this kid named John Mark. And John Mark, solid kid, probably like an up-and-coming kind of guy. He's like, man, I just want to be around it. Let me just do something. Like, kid, you don't know anything. He's like, just let me intern, right? That's kind of what it feels like. They call him a helper. And so he's like, I just want to go. And so they let him go. Like, yeah, come on, you can go. And so you got Barnabas, the old school guy, been around a long time, this brand new, just completely on fire, lit guy that's for Jesus. And so the two of them, and they got this young kid, this John Mark, who's kind of helping them. Like I said, 1,400 miles of church planting. And it's the three of them, and they're just getting it going. We're not even halfway through the trip. Paul ends up getting stoned, like left for dead on the side of the road in the middle of a street. Like they thought he was dead. There's so much blood everywhere. They just were like, oh, he's dead. We'll let the vultures and the dogs get him. And then he survives, right? It completely survives. And so John Mark sees this, and he's like, this is not for me. I was excited. I was excited because Paul was excited. I was excited because Barnabas was excited. I am not excited anymore. I'm going home. And so he goes home to his mama's house, back in Jerusalem. For real, that's where he goes, back to his mama's house. Paul is furious. He's disgusted. He's like, I cannot believe that this joker just left us in the middle of this missionary journey. Like we're not even done yet. He's furious. We know this because you fast forward to the end of the first missionary journey, they get ready to go on the second one. And Barnabas is getting ready to go with Paul again. And he's like, hey, we should take John Mark. And Paul's like, absolutely not. No, there is no chance. He deserted us. I'm not going to depend on him for anything. He is no good. He is useless. Barnabas looks at Paul and is like, no, he's young. Look, you go do your thing. I'm going to take John Mark. And we're going to go and do it. And so they go their separate ways. Fast forward just a little bit. Early church history tells us that John Mark was the first church planter sent to the continent of Africa. The very first church planted in Africa was in a city called Alexandria, Egypt, a city that's still there to this day. One of the 5 most important outposts of the kingdom of God in the first century, planted by John Mark. In fact, if we fast forward to close to the end of Paul's ministry, there's a moment in a letter he writes called 2 Timothy where he says, get Mark and bring him with you because he is helpful to me in my ministry. We don't know how things got reconciled, but at some point, Mark was reintroduced to Paul, so much so that if Paul can ask for anyone, he says, hey, bring Mark with you. He's so helpful to me. But probably the most famous piece that we know Mark from is when we open our Bibles and we look in the New Testament and we go just past Matthew. We see a book written, the Gospel of Mark. You see what some encouragement can do? If it wasn't for Barnabas, we probably don't have Paul. If it wasn't for Barnabas, we for sure don't have the Gospel of Mark. At least not the way it is today. Encouragement. Now, I've spent 25 minutes making the case that encouragement is important. And it's because I believe that's the way our brain works. I believe that our brain works in a way that says if there is something we're going to have to endure, then it would be great to put responsibility on someone else for me to be able to endure it. It tends to be the way we think. Though I would tell you, I think encouragement is enormous. It's actually not the most important thing. Because when we talk about anxiety, encouragement is work someone else does in our direction. But if we really want to get serious about dealing with our own anxiety, it's not going to be someone else's work in our direction. while it can be useful and helpful, and honestly, I believe it is incredibly essential to what we're doing, it is not the first, and it's not the primary, and it's not the most important piece. In other words, encouragement isn't enough. But I'll tell you what is. And honestly, you're not going to like it. It's vulnerability. Vulnerability is essential to overcoming anxiety. But you're thinking, well, vulnerability gives me anxiety. And what does it mean to be vulnerable? It means to open up. It means to open up the doors. It means to open up the windows. It means to let someone in. It means that we put ourselves in a place where we're easily harmed. It means that we put ourselves in a place where we could be at risk. Vulnerability. The thing is, last week we said that we want the opposite of anxiety, whatever. And we think it's peace. We say, no, stop asking for peace. Ask for opportunities to build trust, because trust leads to peace. And so we ended with the question, well, how do you build trust, though? Like, how do you build trust? Because I feel like if I ask for peace, God can just say, peace, right? Peace, you know? And then I'm peaceful, right? And it didn't require any work on my end. It was all someone moving in my direction. But we said, hey, no. The process is trusting, and from trust comes peace. So how do we then build trust? Vulnerability. Vulnerability builds trust. It's so simple, though, isn't it? But that's it. When we have the opportunity to open ourselves up and put ourselves at risk towards someone, and they take that vulnerability and they make sure that we're taken care of, and they say, hey, you know what? I made space on my plate for you. Man, all of a sudden, what? I trust them more. I trust them more. The thing is, we struggle with vulnerability because of a pretty good list of lies. Lie number one, because vulnerability is weakness. Now, fellas, let me talk to you specifically for a second. The last thing any of us want to be is weak. You call me a lot of things. Don't call me weak. See how deep my voice got there? You know what I'm saying? Don't freaking call me weak. Okay? I am country strong. Let's go. Okay? I will put boots on with shorts like that. We don't want to be weak. But for some reason, we got this in our head that, man, if we are vulnerable with someone, that makes us weak. We're too emotional. No. Ain't gonna see me like that. My daddy raised me better. Lie number two, because we have to live picture-perfect lives. That makes sense. We do. I mean, we got to. I mean, the only way a lot of people check in with each other is thumbs and hearts on Facebook, Instagram, you know? And obviously, I mean, what are you going to do? You can't thumbs up or heart, hey, I'm having an anxiety attack. Bless your heart. I mean, you can, I guess. I guess you can. But that's not real, is it? So no, what do we put out there? We put out the picture-perfect pieces of our lives. We don't put our junk all over social media. I mean, well, that's not true. Some people do. It's for a different reason, though. Right? Man. Lie number three. Because we're the only ones with this struggle. And we take a look at our friend circle, we take a look at our whoever it is that's in our family circle, and we're like, ain't nobody else dealing with this but me. Nobody else dealing with this with me. Nobody else is dealing with it but me. So they wouldn't even know where to start. They wouldn't know what to say. I mean, they'd probably be like, what? What? They wouldn't know what to do. It's just me. It's all me, just me, all by myself. It's just me. There's no way. It's impossible. There's no way. I mean, maybe there's a way. No, there's no way. No. There's no way. There's no way. I'm not saying anything because they have no idea. They have no clue. They never. That's what we say. Number 4. Because I shouldn't have this struggle. Right? We say, you know what? Because look at where I am in life. I ain't supposed to be struggling with this. Like, I'm a grown man. I shouldn't be having these struggles right now. Did you see the title on the door? I can't be having these issues. Did you see what I've accomplished in my world? I can't be having these issues. I mean, I do, but I ain't supposed to be. And since I ain't supposed to be, if anyone were to find out that I do have this issue, that I am struggling with this, it would devalue who I am in their sight, and I don't want that. I worked my whole life to get where I'm at. So I'm not about to do something that undoes what I've been working so hard for. I'll just figure it out. I'll figure it out. Just keep it to myself, and I'll figure it out. Vulnerability makes us vulnerable. You know, the truth is, though, vulnerability makes us vulnerable, but so does anxiety. It makes us vulnerable that we're going to miss what God wants us to do next, because we constantly are thinking about something we can't control, or we had the ability to control, but it's gone, it's past, we made a mistake, it's done. We're not getting it back. And so we dwell on it, think on it, and we miss what's next. Because all of our creative energy and thought process is going into how to figure something out. We can't be figured out, right? It just can't be figured out. So we miss. That puts us in a vulnerable state. You know why we struggle with vulnerability? It's because it's like if we were to go to the hospital, right? We go to the hospital, we walk in, the nurse, doctor comes over and says, hey, what's wrong? I'm in pain. Okay, what hurts? I ain't telling you. Well, I mean, okay. Can you point where it hurts? No. I told you, I ain't telling you. Okay. Let's take an x-ray. No. You ain't taking no x-ray. But we don't do that at the doctor or nurse or the hospital, do we? No, when we go to the hospital, we walk in and say, hey, I think I broke my arm. You know? Like it's throbbing. I think this is what it is. I looked at WebMD before I got here. I got this, and this, right? Treat me for all these things right now. You know, got shot for it. You know, give me an IV. Why? Because we know that when we tell someone we got a broken arm, especially the doctor, when the doctor looks at our broken arm, he's not going to take our arm and go, let me see. Right? He ain't going to do that. He's going to be like, oh, just walk it off, rub some dirt on it. He's not going to do that, is he? No, what's he going to do? He's going to say, hey, don't move it. Don't move it. Keep it as still as you can. Hold on one second. Are you in a lot of pain? Let me get you something to help with it. Let me get you one of them slings. Let me get you one of them fancy wheelchairs where you can sit it on it. You know what I'm saying? Like they got a little pad right there. Like, don't move it. But we don't think that's what people want to do in our lives with our anxiety hurt. Because we're afraid they're going to press it. Or they're going to say, ain't no big deal. Just rub some dirt on it. That works in baseball games. Life ain't a game sometimes. It's just not. So, I guess the question is, if we're convinced that vulnerability is an enormous piece, who do I get vulnerable with? I'm glad you asked. It's the person that inspires you with hope, courage, and confidence. You get vulnerable with your encourager. That's who you get vulnerable with. The person when you're around, you're like, man, life just feels a little lighter when I'm around here. You know? Like I feel like I can go a couple rounds. You know? That's the person that you get vulnerable with. Now, encouragement and vulnerability, both enormous pieces. And the question is, what's your role in both of them? Both as the encourager and the one who needs to be vulnerable. These two things are not exclusive of one another. This is a call on our lives to be both. To be the one who inspires with hope and courage and confidence. To actively seek out an opportunity to do that. And it's also a call in our lives to find the people in our lives that inspire us with hope and courage and confidence and say, you know what? I know I can trust you with this. I know I can. Because you know what it needs? It needs hope and courage and confidence. Because the truth is, life is going to happen. The question becomes, when it happens, who are you with? Who are you with? Who's your Barnabas? Who's your Barnabas? And if immediately in your mind you're saying, I don't have a Barnabas. The person I thought was my Barnabas, I was wrong. Don't give up. Don't give up, because God has made you a promise that He will not give you a temptation that's so great that you can't handle, where He will give you a way to endure it. You see, God accomplishes 99% of what He wants to do in this world today through Holy Spirit-filled followers of Jesus. And if you are looking around and saying, I don't think I have a Barnabas, it's just that you're not aware of them yet. But if you are in this room, if you're watching online and you're connected to this follower of Jesus community called Foundation, they are here. You might just have to put yourself out there a little bit and take an invitation. You might have to jump on a team to start meeting some people. You might have to jump into a group to start spending some time with people. You might have to get here a few minutes early to kind of hang out. You might have to stay a few minutes after we wrap up. Grab some ice cream or something and just sit around and begin talking. Remember, all of this is not about what someone else can do for you. It's about you moving in the direction that you know your life ought to be going. Moving towards being the encourager in someone's life. Moving towards being vulnerable, because no one's going to ask you, hey, will you please come down and fill up a place on my plate, right? But you moving in that direction. Stepping out and saying, you know what, I need this. And God's going to provide it. He promised. He's on the hook for coming through. It's there. Encouragement and vulnerability. Encouragement and vulnerability. That's a big piece of our answer.